Ken Paxton is not a low-profile Senate candidate. He is the Texas Attorney General, a Republican, and one of the most recognizable conservative legal figures in the state. His campaign presents him as a fighter, a Trump-aligned conservative who used the Attorney General's office to challenge Democratic administrations, federal agencies, and national policy. His critics point to the same public record and see risk, legal fights, ethics controversies, and a long list of allegations that have followed him through years in office. This profile is not here to declare a verdict for voters. It is here to separate the public record into clear categories: what Paxton's campaign says, what court records show, what reporters documented, what was alleged, and what the outcomes were. FEC records list Warren Kenneth Paxton Jr. as a Republican Senate candidate in Texas. But Paxton is not entering the race as a blank slate. He is Texas Attorney General, which means his current public power comes from being the state's top legal officer. That role matters because Paxton's political identity is tied closely to litigation. As Attorney General, he became known nationally for lawsuits against the federal government and for taking Texas into high-profile legal fights. So the basic profile is straightforward. Paxton is running for Senate with a brand built around legal confrontation, conservative policy fights, and alignment with the Trump wing of the Republican Party. The immediate reason Paxton matters is the Republican side of the 2026 Texas Senate race. This is still a race status question. Polls, filing status, endorsements, and fundraising can change quickly. But Paxton is already important because he is one of the highest-profile Republicans in the contest. Houston Public Media reported on an April 2026 poll that found Paxton ahead of John Cornyn by 8 points among likely Republican runoff voters. That is not a prediction. It is one poll snapshot. It does, however, help explain why Paxton matters for voters. He combines statewide name recognition, a strong conservative legal brand, and a public record that is unusually well documented. Paxton's own campaign describes him as an America First conservative and loyal Trump supporter. His issues page says he would support Trump priorities, including tax cuts, border security, deportations, and what the campaign calls ending the weaponization of government. On immigration, the campaign says Paxton would work to secure the border, finish the wall, and support deportations. On federal power, the campaign says he fought the Biden administration from the Attorney General's office and would bring that same posture to the Senate. Those are campaign claims, so this video treats them as campaign claims. They show how Paxton wants voters to understand him, not as a consensus-first institutional senator, but as a conservative legal fighter who would continue Trump-aligned priorities in Washington. The lawsuit count is central to that brand. Paxton's campaign says he sued the Biden administration more than 100 times. A Dallas Observer count put the number at 106. That count is source-dependent, so the safer framing is attribution rather than treating it as a standalone verified total. But even without treating the exact number as independently verified, the larger point is clear. Lawsuits are not a side note in Paxton's public image. They are one of the main ways he argues he has been effective. For supporters, that record shows he was willing to challenge Democratic administrations and federal policy. For critics, the same record raises a different question: whether constant legal confrontation is a governing strength, a political brand, or both. Either way, Paxton's Attorney General record is the center of the story. This is the part of the profile where precision matters most. Paxton's legal and ethics record is public and relevant. But allegations are not the same thing as proven guilt, and outcomes matter. In 2023, the Texas House impeached Paxton on articles alleging misconduct, bribery, and corruption. Paxton denied wrongdoing. AP reported that the Texas Senate later acquitted him on the 16 impeachment articles it considered. So the fair wording is not that impeachment proved corruption. It did not. The fair wording is that Paxton was impeached on serious allegations, denied wrongdoing, and was acquitted by the Texas Senate. Paxton also faced a state securities fraud case for nearly a decade. AP reported that prosecutors agreed in 2024 to drop the charges under a pretrial diversion deal, requiring nearly $300,000 in restitution. Paxton had pleaded not guilty. So again, the accurate frame is not conviction. It is a long-running criminal case that ended without a trial, under a deal that dropped the charges. Then there is the Nate Paul and whistleblower matter. Former senior aides accused Paxton of misusing his office to help Austin developer Nate Paul. Paxton denied wrongdoing. AP later reported that Paul pleaded guilty to a federal charge of lying to a financial institution, and that Paxton was not mentioned in the federal indictments against Paul. Texas Tribune also reported that former aides won a $6.6 million whistleblower judgment. The careful frame is this: the allegations were serious, the outcomes are part of the record, and none of that supports simplifying the story into a claim that Paxton was convicted of those allegations. Paxton's legal brand also includes his role in Texas vs. Pennsylvania after the 2020 election. Paxton filed the case at the U.S. Supreme Court, challenging how other states conducted their elections. The Supreme Court denied Texas's motion for lack of standing. The order said, "Texas has not demonstrated a judicially cognizable interest in the manner in which another state conducts its elections." That is the source-safe way to describe it. The court did not use that order to prove election fraud. It rejected Texas's attempt to bring the case because Texas lacked standing. For a Paxton profile, the case matters because it shows a recurring pattern. Paxton using the Attorney General's office to put Texas at the center of national political fights. The money picture is a date-stamped snapshot. Captured FEC and Texas Tribune reporting show Paxton raising millions in the Senate race, while the broader Republican contest has attracted major donor and outside group attention. Campaign finance totals change quickly, so this video treats those figures as date-stamped snapshots rather than fixed rankings. The larger point is not just the total amount raised. It is that Paxton enters the Senate race with several forms of political capital: statewide office, national conservative recognition, Trump-aligned messaging, and a base that responds to legal confrontation as proof of strength. At the same time, his record gives opponents obvious lines of attack: impeachment, securities fraud charges that were later dropped under a deal, whistleblower litigation, and questions about electability. That combination makes Paxton one of the most consequential Republicans to understand in the 2026 Texas Senate cycle. A neutral profile does not need to decide whether Paxton's record is a strength or a liability. That is the voter question. Paxton's supporters can point to a long record of fighting Democratic administrations, challenging federal power, and pushing conservative legal arguments from Texas. His critics can point to legal and ethics controversies, polarizing politics, and the risk that a conflict-heavy record could dominate a Senate campaign. Both interpretations begin from the same basic fact. Paxton's career is unusually tied to legal conflict. So the key question is not simply whether voters know his name. It is what they think that record means. The fair picture of Ken Paxton is not a clean record story, and it is not a simple conviction story. It is a story about a Texas Attorney General and Senate candidate whose public career is deeply tied to legal fights. His campaign wants voters to see that as strength, proof that he fights for conservative priorities and the Trump agenda. His opponents will likely frame the same record as risk, proof that his legal and ethics controversies could follow him into a Senate race. The point is not to flatten that into a slogan. It is to show the receipts. Campaign claims as campaign claims, court outcomes as court outcomes, allegations as allegations, and poll snapshots as snapshots. That is how voters can evaluate Ken Paxton on the record, rather than just through the loudest frame around him.